Hi guys, thanks for joining me today. It's Marilyn. On today's video, I want to show you the process that I've learned to dye these earrings that I'm preparing to put in my upcoming Etsy shop. Now, to dye your own earrings, you need to have a veg tan leather that you're working with. And I have used a 2 to 3 ounce veg tan leather on my Cricut, and I have some videos if you're interested in seeing that. So I'd like to start by talking about the 3 basic types of dyes. There's water-based dye. Everything I've used is a water-based dye. There's alcohol-based dyes, and there's oil-based dyes. In the Phoebings line, their water-based dyes are called leather colors, their alcohol-based dyes are called leather dyes, and their oil-based dyes are called pro dye. Now I like the water-based. I just feel more safe using it. It's low VOC, virtually no odor, and it dries relatively quickly. And I found the way I apply it, it comes out very even. Now the downside of the water-based dye, and especially the alcohol dyes, are when they dry on your material's pretty tough. And so if you are cutting with a Cricut, I would definitely cut your material first and then add your dye later. With the dyes, when you buy these are considered full strength. And at full strength, they dry very, very dark. Here is just one quick little example. This is the deep violet. So it is this color right here. I dip dyed this, so that just means I dipped it into the dye itself, and it is extremely, extremely dark. This, on the other hand, I dip dyed into a diluted version or a diluted batch of this deep violet. And it's much brighter. And so I don't typically ever dye anything just full strength. I dilute it. And so when you're using dyes, you have to know what your base is because that's what you're going to use to dilute it. So for example, my water-based dyes, I just dilute them with water. An alcohol-based dye you would dilute with alcohol. And then the pro dyes, the oil-based dyes, I have read that some people dilute them with alcohol because they do actually contain some alcohol. But Phoebings does make a product, it's called a reducer, specifically for the oil-based dye. So here's how I do mine. I bought these containers at Dollar General for $1 each, and they are perfect. They are especially perfect if you are going to dye larger pieces of leather. You can get the whole thing in. Now I only pre-dye if I'm using a leather dye press or my laser cutter, because again, this just would be too hard to cut with the Cricut. When I cut with the Cricut, I use just the raw 2 to 3 ounce, and then I dye it later. So this is a mixture of my scarlet red and some water, and I mix these about 50% dye, 50% water. Slightly more than 50% water actually. This was my blue dye. So let me show you what these come out as. That came out as this beautiful color. My red, I was actually trying to get more of a fuchsia. And so the earrings that I had out here, those came out of that. And this came out of that. This is my brown. And let me show you. These are a pair of earrings. Well, they're not earrings yet because I don't have the hooks in. But these were dipped in brown, but it was a little stronger. They are pretty, but I wanted a little bit less color. And so this was made by letting it soak in this brown. And then finally, my violet turned out like that. I want to show you why I decided to start dip dyeing instead of just applying it with a wool dauber or a rag. This is a piece of leather that I actually tried. Let me lift these up. They might be leaking. Okay, I'm back after that near catastrophe. Dyeing leather is messy, and so you might see I have this little box. My husband just made this for me, and it's a piece of plywood on the bottom and then thin pieces of plywood on each of the 4 sides, and then he actually sealed it with some caulking just in case any of my dyes spilled. They would not seep through the seams. So back to showing you why I like to dip dye versus using a rag or a dauber to apply my leather dye. When I tried to just simply use a rag, I got an inconsistent color. I don't know if that will show perfectly in the video, but it has darker streaks, lighter streaks, and this is about 3 different coats of dye. The other thing is, you'll see on the earrings I'm making, they are finished off nicely on the front and the back. This, when I rubbed it on the back, it really was splotchy. And so it is just much simpler, much faster to use a dip dye method. So very quickly, let me just show you that process. And I'm going to do 2 things. I have these little ovals that are the centers that are cut out of earrings. And first of all, I'm going to put those in my purple, my blue, my scarlet red, and then lastly, and it may not be submerged all the way because this is so low, I want to put it in my brown. And really, that's all the longer you would leave those in a full strength bottle of dye, or if you pour it in something else. So I'm just going to take those out and let those dry while we keep working. Okay, so it didn't get all the way submerged, but enough to show you the difference between full strength and diluted. And today what I'm going to dip dye is just this little fringe veg tan leather earring that I'm playing with. I kind of had a mistake over here, so this is just a scrap. I'm really interested to see when it dries, will these little lines show through, because as it dries it does contract just a little bit. And I think I'm going to use the purple. Now to me, this looks red. So I have these other little excess pieces over here. When I open some dye, if I don't know what color it is, I just kind of swish this around in it. And then as it dries, I can tell that yes, that is the purple. Now mine's getting fairly low, but it'll still work. What I like to do is I like to put it nice side face down first, just so I get it all saturated at once. And then I just shake it around. Then I just use a toothpick and I just kind of flip it up and turn it over. And then again, I'll shake it, especially if it's low like this. If it's not low, then I'm not going to worry about shaking it so much, but if it's low, I really want it to get all around the leather and saturate it very nicely. And that's it. I take it out. Then I'm going to let it just kind of hang over the container for a little bit until part of it drips back into my container. And then I just lay it out on my wax paper and I call it good. Here's our other ones that I had dip dyed before the video. They are drying, and as they dry, this, which really looks like the full strength right now, as it dries, it's going to dry to this lighter color. And so from simply adding water to your mixture, your final product could be super dark, it could be medium, or it could be just a very, very light purple. Let's say you use 75% water and 25% dye, then it's going to be even lighter. Another example back here, here's the full strength scarlet red. And then this, because I wanted mine more of a pink, that is a diluted color of it. Now, I mainly used the scarlet red for this. I did put just a tiny bit of the purple to try to make it a little bit more fuchsia. I don't know how successful I was there, but that's what I was going for. And then these blue earrings, I just used blue and water, and look at the color difference there. Full strength, diluted. And then for the brown, there's my full strength color. That is very similar to one of the earrings I showed you. And then here's my diluted brown. Now, if you also want to emboss, you're going to let this dry overnight. And so for my pairs of earrings, I actually dipped them 2 to 3 times, depending upon the shade, when they had dried for about an hour. The next step to making these earrings is to send them through the embossing machine. And so here is a pair that I've already embossed, and these actually have the top coat on them, which we'll go through here in just a few minutes. I have several pieces here that need to run through the embossing machine. I let these dry overnight after dipping them 3 times. My machine is a Sizzix Texture Boutique. It's just a very inexpensive embossing machine, hand crank. You can get this on Amazon, and I'll link to this. And I do want to thank you, anyone that uses my links, thank you so much. I do not receive notice from Amazon on who is using them. So I can't send you a personal thank you, but I did want to mention that here. For these earrings, I'm using this embossing folder, but you can use whatever you have. When I do this, I want to place the whole of my earring in an area where it's not going to get embossed. And so I find a void in the pattern and I set it there. And this pattern is symmetrical. So it doesn't matter if I'm up here exactly even with that. It's all the same pattern. Let me set this down. It'll be a little bit easier for me. Okay, those look good. So once you shut this down, you just want to be careful that those don't move. Now with this Texture Boutique, you get 2 of these little sandwich plates. And the ends are beveled. You're going to put your folder inside. Those bevels just allow it to start going through the embossing mechanism more easily. So you just set it in there till it doesn't really give a whole lot, and then hold the handle on top and just start cranking. These go through rather quickly. I did make the mistake of going through super slowly. I came backwards with it. And when I took the earrings out, they were so embossed. The embossing was so deep or so lifted. And when it stretched that leather, the coloring on the embossed part turned much lighter than what I wanted it to. So I've learned, just run it through once and it's going to look great. Came out just superb. Now, I don't usually wear gloves when I'm doing embossing, but my hands are a mess from my little snafu, my little leakage problem. Okay, so I'm just going to use a little piece of a soft cloth, a stretchy cotton cloth, and some Resin. Now, they say not to shake the Resin, but I like all the particles to get mixed up. If you're putting this on with a dauber or a brush, you don't want bubbles in it. But the way I do it, you're going to see it really doesn't matter. I'm going to put a generous amount on my cloth. And then I'm just going to rub it on. And you're going to see this will really darken up a little bit and saturate your earring. As it dries, it's not going to be that dark or that saturated. It will be a little darker and more saturated than when you started, but it won't be as dark or saturated as what it looks like right now. For example, this piece already has my top coat on it, and you can already see this is lightening up some, but you can see that the top coat does darken up your leather. So this has its top coat. It was done yesterday. It's perfectly dry. No top coat. And then here's our newly applied top coat. It will feel dry enough to the touch to handle within just a couple minutes. So I'm just going to repeat this process on the other 3 earrings. When they're embossed, sometimes your Resolene doesn't get down all the way to the leather, so you either have to add quite a bit more or just dab it on so it's pressed down in there. And I said earlier, I don't really care about bubbles because when you're putting it on like this, you're not going to have bubbles. You're going to press those bubbles out. Okay, so all I'm going to do now is start over. This one is plenty dry to be able to do a second coat. And after my second coat, I'm going to let them dry. I can let them dry for about 30 minutes and then they'll be ready to put the hardware on. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the hardware. I've put hardware on in tons of videos. Now, on my second coat, I like to go around the edge. Just kind of buff it down. And get some of the Resolene on the sides. Then I'll just go back over the top, make sure that any fingerprints I had on the top get buffed out. And I just try to hold them from the sides so that I'm not getting a lot of fingerprints on the top. Okay guys, here's my final earring dangles. I think they look great, just a beautiful color. The other 2 colors that I'll be offering in about a week when my Etsy page is really up and running are the purple and the blue. I'll give it more of a plug once it's up and running. For now, I really just wanted you to see the process of leather dyeing and the beautiful things you can make with it. Thanks so much for joining me. If you liked anything on the video, found it helpful, inspiring, or just had fun watching it, please give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, leave them in the comment section. And if you'd like to see what I'll be working on in the future, hit that subscribe button. Then if you tap the bell, YouTube should notify you when I upload new content. Thanks again. Have a great day. I'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye.